She told me she slept better when I was home. She said it once, quietly, the way you say something you've been carrying around for a while and finally set down, not looking for a reaction, not asking for anything, just putting it out there like a fact she'd checked and confirmed and was done debating with herself. I didn't know what to do with that. So I said something like, "That's good," and changed the subject. Because I was 27 and in possession of a complete inability to receive anything that felt like too much. I've thought about that sentence almost every day for 2 years. Her name was Claire, and she had been my roommate for 14 months before the sentence, my closest friend for 11 of those 14, and the person I had been carefully not thinking about in any particular way for at least 6. Because thinking about her in any particular way felt like reaching for something I hadn't earned the right to touch. She was steady in the way that makes you trust someone before you know why. She remembered things, returned things, said what she meant with a minimum of decoration. When she told you something was fine, she meant it was fine. When she told you something wasn't, she meant that too. In a world that runs almost entirely on ambiguity, Claire was unusually easy to read, which should have made everything simpler and somehow made it more terrifying. We had stumbled into living together through a mutual friend who knew we were both looking and thought we'd either get along perfectly or destroy each other, and had been right on the first count. The apartment was a 3rd-floor walk-up with a broken radiator we'd named Gerald, and a kitchen window that stuck every single time, but which, once you got it open, had a view of the street below that was worth the effort, especially in the rain. We had divided the space without a negotiation. She took the left side of the refrigerator. I took the right. She kept the mornings quiet until 10. I kept the evenings calm enough for her to read in the living room. And by the 3rd month, none of this had been discussed. It had just happened. The way arrangements happen between 2 people who are paying attention to each other. I was paying attention. I just didn't know what I was paying attention for. The first sign that something was different from ordinary friendship arrived on a Wednesday in February. And I missed it. Because I was distracted and because I was a particular kind of fool. She had been sick. Nothing serious. A bad cold that had settled in her chest and made her sound like she was auditioning for a documentary about Victorian illness. I had gone to the pharmacy at 8 in the morning before she woke up, bought the specific kind of tea she liked, plus the wrong kind twice before I found the right one, and left it outside her door with a note that said, "Gerald says feel better," because we had established early on that Gerald communicated through us. She found it at 9. She knocked on my door at 9:15, still in the oversized sweater she slept in, hair pulled up, tissue in hand, looking like she hadn't slept well. And she stood in my doorway for a moment without saying anything. "You went out," she said finally. "Pharmacy's only 3 blocks. It's February. I'm aware." She looked at me with an expression I cataloged as confused and possibly feverish and moved on. What I did not catalog, because I was not yet paying attention in the right direction, was that she stayed in my doorway for a few extra seconds before she went back to her room, that she said thank you twice, that she kept the note. I found out about the note later, much later, in the way you find out things that were true the whole time. March brought the situation with her job, which was the first time I understood how much I was willing to do for her and how little I examined why. She was a project manager at a mid-size firm, and she had spent the better part of 6 months cleaning up a disaster that her predecessor had created and then left behind like an inheritance nobody wanted. She was good at it. She was genuinely, almost irritatingly good at her work. But the project had gone sideways in a specific way that had nothing to do with her competence and everything to do with a client who had decided, without informing anyone, to change the scope of what they needed 2 weeks before the delivery deadline. She came home on a Thursday and put her bag down on the kitchen counter and stood there without moving for long enough that I looked up from what I was doing. "He sent the new specs today," she said. 2 weeks out. I put down what I was doing. "How different?" "Different." She pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table. 40% of the build needs to change. In 2 weeks. In 2 weeks. She looked at her hands. "My team's going to have to work through the weekend. I have to tell them tomorrow." "What do you need right now?" She looked up at me, and something in her expression shifted. A small recalibration, like she'd been bracing for something else. "I don't know yet." "Okay," I said. "Tell me when you do." She did. We stayed up until 1 in the morning, me at the kitchen table with her, going through the project timeline while she rebuilt it from the changed specs. I don't work in project management. I was not useful in any technical sense, but I could tell when a section of the timeline was making her tense and ask her to explain it out loud, which is sometimes the same thing as helping. Because talking something through a second time reveals the part that you were too close to see the first. At 11:30, she found a sequencing solution that bought back 4 days, which was not all of it, but was most of it. She sat back and let out a long breath. "That works," she said. "You found it." "We found it." She got up to make tea, and I noticed she made 2 cups without asking. These are the things you file away without knowing you're filing. The incident with Marcus happened in April, and it is the part I am least proud of. Marcus was someone she'd been seeing, not seriously, she'd told me, which I had accepted as information and not as something I had any feelings about, because I was committed to having no feelings about it. He was pleasant enough in the way that people who are pleasant to your face sometimes are. And he and Claire had been getting dinner occasionally for about 6 weeks when she came home on a Saturday, looking the specific kind of tired that has nothing to do with sleep. "Marcus canceled," she said. "Tonight?" 40 minutes ago." She sat on the couch. "He does this. This is the 3rd time." I sat across from her. "What does he say when he cancels?" "That something came up." She said it the way you say something when you're done arguing with it. The first time I believed him. The second time I wondered. This time She stopped. "I'm not angry. I'm just done spending energy on someone who isn't spending it back." I looked at her. "That sounds right." "Does it?" "You shouldn't have to wonder twice with someone." She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "No, you shouldn't." And she looked at me with an expression I did not know how to read in that direction yet, which was my own limitation and not hers. She texted Marcus that evening. She did not tell me what the text said, but he didn't come up in conversation again. She told me she slept better when I was home on a Tuesday in May, on the couch, at the end of an ordinary evening. And I said, "That's good," and she nodded once. And we kept watching whatever we were watching. And I changed the subject. And the sentence sat in the room between us without either of us touching it. What I understand now is this. She was not making a small observation about sleep patterns. She was telling me I made the world feel safer to her. She was telling me that my presence, specifically mine, specifically in the apartment, changed how her body decided it was okay to rest. She was telling me something true and large and personal, and she had chosen an understated way to say it because that was how she operated, and because she was testing, gently, whether I was paying the kind of attention she had quietly hoped I was. I was not. Not yet. The thing that clarified everything was not a conversation. It was a Thursday in June when I came home at 10:30 from a work dinner that had run long, and the apartment was dark except for the kitchen light, and Claire was asleep on the couch with a book open on her chest and her phone on the cushion beside her. She had fallen asleep waiting. She hadn't told me she was going to. There was no text that said, "I'll be up," no plan, no arrangement. She had just stayed up in the living room. Somewhere around 10 o'clock, her body had decided the waiting was taking too long, and it had put her to sleep on the couch like it didn't entirely trust her to do the right thing herself. I stood in the doorway of the living room for a moment and felt something rearrange itself in my chest that had apparently been waiting a considerable time to do so. I put a blanket over her. I took her phone off the cushion and set it on the table so it wouldn't fall. I went to my room and sat on the edge of my bed in the dark. And I thought about the pharmacy in February, and the kitchen table in March, and the couch in May, and the Tuesday sentence I had changed the subject on. And I thought about the fact that I had been paying the closest attention of my life to another person for over a year, without ever once asking myself what that attention was. I knew what it was. I had known for months. I had simply refused to pick it up and look at it directly. I told her on a Friday morning over coffee, which is not a dramatic setting, but is the right one for two people who have been honest with each other in small ways for 14 months. She was at the kitchen counter with her mug, and I was at the table, and I said, without preamble, because preamble had already cost me time, I changed the subject in May. When you said you slept better when I was home, I changed the subject because I didn't know how to say that I understood what you meant. She looked at me over her mug. She did not say anything. I understood what you meant, I said. I just wasn't ready yet. I am now. She put her mug down. She crossed the kitchen and sat in the chair across from me at the table, the same chair she'd sat in March at 1 a.m. And she looked at me with the expression she uses when she has figured something out and decided to trust it. I wondered if you did, she said. Understand. I did. And now I'm not changing the subject. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine, which is such a quiet thing, and also the kind of thing that changes the entire shape of a room. Okay, she said. Then don't. We are still in the apartment with Gerald and the stuck kitchen window and the rain view and the left and right sides of the refrigerator, which have not reorganized themselves because they do not need to. Some things were already in the right place. It turns out two people can share a space for over a year and be building something without knowing they are building it. And then one of them says a quiet sentence on a couch on a Tuesday, and the other one is slow, but not too slow, about figuring out what to do with it. She still tells me she sleeps better when I'm home. I tell her I know. I tell her the same is true in the other direction, which she already knew, because she was always the one paying closer attention. There is a specific kind of love that announces itself in an ordinary sentence at an ordinary hour. And if you're not listening for it, you will change the subject and lose months you didn't have to lose. I nearly did. I am grateful every day that nearly is not the same as did. Have you ever heard someone tell you something true about yourself in plain language and only understood it later? When you were alone in the dark and honest enough to admit what it meant? And has someone ever stayed up waiting for you, not because they said they would, but because they simply couldn't help it? And have you ever realized, in that moment, exactly what you were to them? Tell me in the comments. Subscribe if you've ever been the person someone sleeps better beside, and if you were lucky enough to finally say so.